Hey, Spuddies, Potato McWhiskey here, and welcome to my analysis of the Civilization 6 December 2020 game update. The patch notes are live, and by the time you've seen this video, it's probably been out for a couple of days. The big new feature in this patch is the city-state picker. When you do an advanced setup for your game, you can actually pick and choose which city-states you want to have in the game, which is really, really cool. If you're going to be playing like a scientific civ and you want a little bit of a more chill game, you can actually just put all scientific city-states into the game and have a much easier time. I think this is a fantastic feature. I'm really excited to try it out and come up with cool ideas. Maybe we'll take all the city-states that give you science, or maybe we'll do all the city-states that give you amenities, because amenities have also been given some changes, and there's a lot of really cool things you can do, and you have a bit more control over how your game is set up, which is always a good thing because ultimately the game comes down to having fun, and I think this is a fun feature. There's also the searchable unit list, which is a new feature in the game. There already kind of was a unit search function, but this is kind of formalizes it into a real feature, which is a big help. Sometimes you don't know where your scouts are or where your units ran off to, and you have to kind of spend a bit of time scrolling around the map, and being able to actually search them out is going to make your life that much easier. There's a whole slew of game updates depending on which rule sets and DLC that you have. There is some general polish. For example, religious community now gives international trade routes +2 gold to cities with holy sites and +2 additional gold for every building in that holy site. So that's really nice. That's going to make trading internationally. If you get a religious ally, for example, I believe you would get +2 faith for trading with them. And then if they have fully built holy sites, you'll actually get +8 gold for that trade route on top of all the additional yields that you get. For example, if you have them as your ally and you have Wisselmeiken plugged in, you can get a ton of gold, faith, production, and food from international trade routes now. So that's really cool. I like this change to religious community. Religious community was quite weak, so I'm happy to see it get some changes. I think it's actually kind of a viable pick now. It says here they also fixed an issue where wonder build requirements were being fulfilled by districts owned by other players. I think this is where if you needed to place a wonder down and it needed to be beside a theater square, for example, if you were neighboring another player who had built a theater square, you could use their theater square for adjacency. So this is just like a minor balance change. I don't think this really came up very often. I think about in 1 in 10 of my games, I was actually able to take advantage of this, but it's still nice that this is getting fixed because it was a bug. At least that's the way I see it. I see it as a bit of a bug. I mean, I guess you could see it as a feature. It didn't come up very often, but it probably is better that it doesn't work that way. They also dropped the melee unit combat bonus against anti-cavalry to 5, and then also reduced the combat bonus from the thrust anti-cavalry promotion from +10 to +5. So anti-cavalry are a little bit better. I don't think that this adequately addresses the problems with anti-cavalry units. The big problem with anti-cavalry units is that they are immobile and specialized in fighting a type of unit that can avoid them, and they're very weak to range units. So I don't think melee units were like a really big problem for anti-cavalry units, but this will be a significant buff for civilizations like Greece, for example, who have a unique anti-cavalry unit. They'll be a little bit stronger at fighting off swordsmen and stuff like that. I don't think this is going to make or break them, but it will be helpful, and it does mean that you can maybe go for other promotions. The problem here is that even leveled up, melee spearmen just don't get that good. So I'd like to maybe see some more changes to the promotion tree for, anti-cavalry units and make them a little bit more viable. They also fixed an issue with John Curtin's leader ability, the Citadel of Civilization, where it was unintentionally lasting for 20 turns when it should only last for 10 turns. This is a good fix. Obviously, John Curtin has always been a strong leader, and with 20 turns, they were kind of insane. There's been a couple of balance passes on great people and just some minor tweaks. For example, Einstein now applies his bonus to research labs, since Isaac Newton already applies his bonus to universities. That is going to spread out the sort of bonuses and make universities less valuable and kind of increase the value of research labs, which are already pretty low value. They come out really late into the game and they require power. So I think this is going to mean Einstein is weaker, but perhaps better in some circumstances where you have a relatively small empire and you have really high production where you can get those research labs up easily. They also boosted Alfred Nobel's ability to apply 20 great person points. I think it was previously, 100, it was previously 20, so they basically buffed him by, 5 times, which is great because I feel like 20 great people points, it wasn't a lot, but 100 now, that's a significant bonus. That's a pretty big deal. Even Alfred Nobel is going to be really useful, for example, in a culture game because it's applying across multiple great people that you're going to want to get, and you get them pretty often. So you're going to be able to take advantage of that pretty regularly. Otherwise, Alfred Nobel is now actually a valuable pick, whereas before he was kind of one of the great scientists that you skip, if I remember correctly. They also increased Leonardo da Vinci's culture bonus for workshops to +3 instead of +1. I think this has been a buff that's a long time in the making. Leonardo da Vinci was not very good for a very long time, and even with the mausoleum that allows you to use his ability twice, he was still kind of underwhelming. But this is a very, very nice buff. +3 culture on your workshops is a significant bonus, and you're going to be able to take much better advantage of his abilities. This is an especially important change because you don't build as many industrial zones in all of your cities anymore with the changes, over the course of the game. They're much better if you build just a few of them and hit all your cities with power and, regional production. So I think Da Vinci has just been a long time in a bad place, and I'm glad to see him get a change. For amenities, they've actually restored some of the penalties from negative amenities back to their previous thresholds. Revolts will now occur at -7. I think it was -8 before. Basically, they're adding +1 to all the negative thresholds, so you'll actually hit them a little bit earlier. And this is a big change that I've been looking forward to. For a long time, I've been hoping they would make a change like this. Happy now gives you +10% yields, and Ecstatic now gives you 20%. That's going to massively increase the value of actually having positive amenities. My big problem with this is still that the system lacks granularity. You need to have +2 positive amenities to hit that 10% threshold, and then Ecstatic, I think, is now +5. I would just much rather see +5% per level up to 4 or 5 amenities positive. Still, this is a move in the right direction for amenities. There's probably a reason they don't make the change that I would personally like to see them make, but I do think this is a kind of step in the right direction for amenities, because amenities have been kind of ignorable for a very long time, and theater squares have been getting buffs with their adjacency to, entertainment complexes have been getting buffs with their adjacency to theater squares. So I definitely feel like amenities and entertainment complexes are now in a much better place, and this is going to massively buff things like the Colosseum, giving you a ton of extra yields in the early game to where that investment is now even better. And the Colosseum was already like a really damn good wonder. It also is going to increase the value of having a relatively small empire with a lot of amenities. I think that is one of the themes of this balance pass that they're doing, at least if we look at some of the other changes that they're making later on. Now, with regards to social policies, in the Gathering Storm expansion, they've made a change to Raj. Now you'll get +2 gold for trade routes to city-states. I think this is a very, very slight buff to the Raj card. I don't think it's super amazing still, but now it's kind of getting to the point where I would maybe consider plugging it in. I still don't think it's a super great card. It's a maybe. There's also public transportation, which I believe has been completely reworked. It was a pretty broken card in certain circumstances if you knew how to take advantage of it and use it. So I'm glad to see it get a bit of a rework. I don't know if the rework is super great, but now neighborhoods with charming appeal, and I believe charming is 2 appeal or more, they get +3 food and +1 production, and breathtaking appeal gets an additional +1 food and +1 production, which means a single neighborhood could be bringing you in 4 food, 2 production, which is a really nice boost to the neighborhood, and all neighborhoods innately now generate +1 gold. I do feel like that could be +2 gold, just to help, kind of make them a little bit stronger. But I like that this is the direction that they have gone with the public transportation card, because now neighborhoods are potentially viable with this card plugged in, whereas before they were only really viable, in my opinion, if you were going for the late game buildings, for example, for tourism. Now I think this is going to significantly change the game, and again, this is another change aimed at pushing cities to be a little bit taller. Another change they've made is that the democracy government bonus, which previously gave you +4 food and production to trade routes to your allies, also applies to city-states that you have suzerainty of, which is really, really great. Anything that makes city-states a little bit better and more relevant is going to be something that players are going to be competing over. It will be a little bit frustrating if an AI just decides to like nuke your city-state or something like that. I definitely like this change a lot, and it feels like it is thematic and applies and is really, really great. I like this direction of the change, especially because there are certain builds and, you know, leaders that work really well going for a democracy build and trying to keep suzerainty of a lot of city-states. This is going to open up a lot of new trade routes, especially if you're in a game where you actually can't trade with other players. I think this is actually going to be a significantly impactful change for multiplayer, especially with the change to Vissel Banking, which will now also apply +2 food and production to allied city-states and allies. One of the biggest changes I'm seeing here, though, is frescoes, and a lot of these cards have been getting changed. And again, this is another thing where a lot of these changes I feel like have been things suggested by the community, things that we've been essentially asking for since the launch of the game, something in this kind of a direction, that these cards were just never very good. Like frescoes gave you +2 great artist points, but now it gives you an additional +2 great artist point for every art museum you have, which is a huge change. And I also think this is important because art museums are really not in an amazing place. I plan to do a video on artists versus archaeological museums and stuff like that later on. But the short version of the story is that art museums just really don't add a lot of value to your empire compared to archaeological museums. You're almost better just waiting for archaeological museums and kind of deleting your artists when you get them. But now that you can get your artists a little bit earlier and you can get more value out of your art museums, this definitely is, you know, kind of pushing it in the direction of getting some play in high-level games, I feel like. There's also laissez-faire changes, which gives you +2 great merchant points for every bank, and +4 great merchant points for every stock exchange, and +2 great admiral points for every shipyard, and +4 great admiral points for every seaport. This is a good change. I still don't like great admirals. They're okay, but they kind of feel like just worse great merchants. That said, this is another one of those changes we've just been waiting for and hoping for, and I'm really looking forward to the amount of great merchant point generation you're going to be able to do in your games. And I like what this is doing is that it allows you to sort of pre-prepare your infrastructure and be like, okay, this great merchant appeared, I'm gunning for him now, I'll plug in laissez-faire, I'll buy a bank, I'll build my stock exchanges, I'll power them, I'll do all that sort of stuff, and now you can kind of really target great people, or even just passively take them all for yourself by pushing really hard for great people. And I do like that this is opening up more diversity in terms of the great people strategies, which were basically like build all the buildings and then run projects, and there wasn't a whole lot of interaction there. So I think this is really good. It's going to promote interesting choices in the game. We also have Science Foundation, which gives you +2 great scientist points for every university and +4 great scientist points for every research lab. Again, these changes kind of push in the direction of going for a more tall build. It also gives you +2 great engineer points for every factory and +4 great engineer points for every power plant. Very much so a card you're going to want to have plugged in if you're going for a science game now. Huge, wonderful, amazing changes. Very happy to see that. There's also military organization, which does the same thing for great generals, for armories and military academies. It also gives you great generals +2 movement. It is important to remember that all of these cards are wild card slots, which is going to make any civ that has extra wild card slots, or any wonders that give you wild card slots, like the one that I am forgetting now off the top of my head, the Forbidden Palace. All of these things are going to gain value since these wild card policies are getting buffed. You have more options and viable directions you can take your civilization. Symphonies does the same things for great musicians, gives you +4 great musician points and +4 more for every broadcast center. There's also Invention, which is a sort of more early game version of the Science Foundation. It gives you +4 great engineer points and +2 for every workshop. But these next changes are massive. This is going to very much so change the way the game is played. Rationalism, Simultaneum, Grand Opera, and Free Market have all been changed. Now they require a population of 15 rather than 10, and an adjacency bonus of 4 rather than 3. This is going to be a huge nerf to wide play, because it's actually quite easy to get 10 population and 3 adjacency, whereas 15 population and adjacency of 4 is much harder. To put that in perspective, to get 10 population in a city, you need to get a surplus food of about 733. To get 15 population, you need to have a surplus food total over the course of a game of about 1563. That almost doubles the amount of food you're going to have to generate to get that 50% science bonus from Rationalism. Along with some of the other changes, this is again going to move things in a much taller direction. I don't think wide is going to go anywhere. Wide is still going to be supremely powerful, but there are definitely going to be new ways that you can look at sort of making a smaller, taller empire very, very powerful with cards like Rationalism. I think this is going to help differentiate your cities a little bit, because you might still just throw down a campus in a city, but you might also kind of wait and pick and choose and be like, okay, can this city get to 15 population? Then I'll build a campus. Can this city get to 15 population and get an adjacency bonus of 4? Can this city get an adjacency bonus of 4? Or can the city reach both of those things? Probably not. So what I'll do instead is I'll use this city to generate things to go to my other cities. And this is going to open up and kind of cause a bit of specialization if you're going for a taller build or even a wider build. I think this is a huge change to the game. And it's one that I initially had a very negative reaction to. I was like, oh, I don't like that. That's going to make the games longer and harder and more boring. But then I sat and I thought about it for a while, and I think this is actually going to open up some new strategies. I definitely feel like what this is going to do is, whereas previously, cities would hit like an average of 10 population, and then you would sit at that 10 population and you're happy, you get your 4 districts and you can do whatever you want, you can hit all your numbers, all you got to do is get your adjacency and 10 population and you're off to the races for whatever victory type you're going for. Now I think what this is going to cause is a bit of a kind of middle dip, like a valley in the distribution of the population of cities. I think you're going to see a lot of builds operating around the 7 population limit, where you go for a 3 district per city build, and then another one where you go for a much bigger 16 population per city, which is 7 districts per city. I think you're going to see a lot more trending in that direction, and a few less sort of hovering around that middle bit, because the optimal breakpoints are going to be differing. I think in that 7 population example, we're going to see a lot of project working. We're not going to see a lot of hard building things. We're going to get our basic infrastructure online and then pump hard using projects. And then in the bigger build, we're going to see a lot of infrastructure development, building things like universities, research labs, all that sort of stuff. This has massive implications for the science game and the faith game. It doesn't have that big of a change for things like Grand Opera, because it's not really super relevant for a culture game anyway. And Free Market was just like a non-pick 99% of the time anyway. But definitely Rationalism and Simultaneum. I think what we'll see for Rationalism is a lot of builds that diverge. Either you go super wide science or super tall science, and then for Simultaneum, I think we'll almost always, except for the Khmer, see a super wide religion build, and you just go for as high adjacency on your holy sites as possible. There's also a really big change to urban planning. Instead of going obsolete with the Merchant Republic government, it goes obsolete with Rationalism. That's the card that gives you +1 production per city. I don't think that's going to massively change how I play. I would like to see that card have a replacement, like a buffed replacement, like, +1 food, +1 production per city, or something just kind of a little bit better. It kind of just doesn't feel nice when you lose that and you still have like low pop cities that are struggling. Urban planning is cool. I'd like to see a better like late game version of urban planning. That would be really, really cool. But I do kind of think that other cards kind of take priority once you reach Rationalism, so I guess it's okay for you to lose it. There's also massive changes coming to the technology and civics tree. A lot of unboostable technologies are going to be given boosts, and a lot of things that had really high boost requirements, like for example advanced ballistics, you needed to build 2 oil power plants. Now you can boost it by getting 1. This is a buff for every civ, but in particular this is a big buff for Babylon. Advanced flight, you only need 2 biplanes now. Capitalism, you only need 2 stock exchanges now. Electricity, you only need 2 privateers, and you can kind of see the theme follows. Pretty much everything had its requirement reduced by one or half or roundabout there. I think one of the big ones is professional sports, because building 4 entertainment complexes, man, that was a tough one. But if you only have to build 2, you'll be able to unlock professional sports quite a few turns earlier, and the Stadio de Maracana is a very, very good and potent late game wonder for amenities. So I think we'll be seeing a lot more Stadio de Maracana and a lot more culture in our science games, because that 20% yield boost can apply to your science as well. There's also some adjusted information era boosts. Instead of being boosted through a great scientist or spy, nuclear fusion, for example, you build a nuclear power plant. Satellites, you build 2 broadcast centers. And for telecommunications, it now can only be boosted by a great scientist or spy. This is the nuclear submarine technology, if I remember correctly. So this was almost never picked up in most games anyway. So this is really like, kind of a nerf to an already unpicked technology, which is kind of an okay thing to do. But yeah, this is huge, especially for Babylon. You kind of hit a wall when you're playing Babylon in the previous patch, where you would just get to XYZ level of the tech tree and then you just had to hard grind your way through. And the only way you could actually boost them was to like let someone else get ahead of you in science, which kind of felt wrong and didn't play right. So I'm glad to see these changes. For Rise and Fall and Gathering Storm, Ethiopia has received some updates. In particular, this is aimed at adjusting secret societies, which is one of my favorite game modes. Players will now only receive 1 free governor title from the very first secret society you discover, instead of getting 4 as you discover each of them, right? You could discover 4 secret societies, which gives you 4 governor titles really early into the game, which I think it was having a really bad effect on the balance of the early game, because you weren't really making choices anymore or like making sacrifices, because you could kind of get everything you wanted. Now that you're getting 3 less governor titles in the early game, I think that's a good change. It was kind of fun to have that many governor titles, but this is going to be better. There's also a change to the diplomatic quarter. Now they receive the +1 yield from the autocracy bonus. I think this is a nice buff for autocracy and the diplomatic quarter. Autocracy is kind of an underused government, I feel like, and the diplomatic quarter is kind of an underused district. So kind of buffing them together, making them work together in a way that's really useful, because you get +1 food now, you get +1 production, +1 science, +1 faith, +1 gold. It kind of makes them a little bit better, and I like that. I don't know if it solves the issues with diplomatic quarter, but I already think autocracy is really, really powerful, and this will definitely push me in the direction of maybe going for more diplomatic quarters earlier into my games. They also fixed an issue where neutral territory vampire castles were not removing vampire build charges. It was kind of insane and broken. I had meant to make a video on it, but I just totally forgot and lost track of myself. But it was kind of fun to play around with. They also stopped ley lines from appearing on snow tiles. This is a really, really nice change. I don't know about you guys, but every time I was playing Secret Societies and I went for the Hermetic Order, like a solid quarter of my ley lines were appearing on snow. They didn't actually reduce the total amount of ley lines, so you should get more density of ley lines across your empire, which is really, really nice. They also buffed ley lines. Now they provide a major adjacency. Major adjacency is +2, up from +1. So Hermetic Order is going to be really, really good for a science game now, because you only need to find, if you have ley lines, you only need to really find 2 more adjacency bonus before you can hit that breakpoint for Rationalism, where you'll get the +50% science. They also reduced the number of ley lines on TSL maps. I don't really play TSL, so that doesn't affect me. They updated the Secret Society pop-up flow upon discovering and joining a society. That's pretty cool. They also implemented new names and descriptions for Secret Society pop-ups and notifications. I think that is some changes to the Hermetic Order, because it just had some weird names, and now it has Margrave or something. I can't remember what it was. There's been some updates to the Pirates pack. There's been some updates to the Pirates game mode too. I haven't really played a huge amount of this, so I won't comment on these. I don't know if they're going to have massive changes. It looks like they're a little bit more interesting. Trade ships are a little bit less often. Things can't target things in the fog of war anymore. And you have a bit of a better notification for, your treasure found notifications. This all feels like quality of life and just adjustments to the balance of it, which feels really nice because it is actually a very fun game mode. In the Byzantium and Gaul pack, we have some nice changes. The Biosphere's appeal now applies to all cities in the empire in which it was built. The Biosphere was a little bit buggy and didn't work correctly the way it was worded, so I'm glad to see that it is now working as the player would read it and expect it to. I'm excited to actually use that in a culture game, because one of the things I like about the Biosphere is that it actually makes the sort of end of the technology tree more interactable, because previously you would get computers and steel, and then the rest of the tech tree was basically irrelevant to you until you got the coastal settlement one that allows you to build those seaside habitats. Byzantium will also no longer receive free cavalry units in captured cities where they already have the existing buildings. This is a big deal. Byzantium could kind of snowball to insane levels, so I'm glad to see them get just a little bit brought back to just being a snowball civ rather than being like an absurdly insane snowballing civ. If you captured a theater or an entertainment complex, you would like get even more free units. It was insane. It was really, really fun, but it was absurdly broken. I'm glad to see them get adjusted. They can also now only build the water park or the hippodrome. I think they had like a weird edge case where you could build both, which would be kind of silly, but it's nice now that this is kind of consistent with the rest of the game mechanics. I'm a big fan of this change too to the Gaul. They also get tourism from their mines now. I'm really big fan of that. They probably just added in the modifier to mines that like allows culture to convert to tourism at flight, which is really, really cool. I'm a big fan of that. And I think that's going to push Gaul in a really interesting cultural direction, because there's a lot you can do as the Gauls to actually get tourism from sort of unintuitive sources. You have such a high production that you can build wonders willy-nilly. You can build all sorts of different things and sort of focus a production-oriented game towards tourism, which is really, really nice. They also fixed an issue where the Sactina Golden Age policy card was not properly granting extra great people points. Very happy to see fixes for stuff like this. Heroes and Legends has been changed as well. Hippolyta is now an anti-cavalry class unit. Previously, she was a melee class unit. I like this. She is a spearman, so I like to see her actually sort of operating the way she should, quote unquote should. Enemy units will convert to players' units after attacking and dying to Huanapu and the twins. I don't know how to say their names, so I'm just going to call them the twins. Basically, there was like a weird edge case where sometimes it was actually better to attack the twins and get yourself killed so that they couldn't attack you on the next turn and convert you into their unit. So I like to see that this is fixed. Arthur's Accolade can no longer be used on naval units. I actually didn't see this happen, but I think it's hilarious that it could happen. Oya's Storm now affects religious units. This is a huge change to Oya, because it basically turns her into a mega guru, a mecha guru, an unstoppable religious force. Because usually Oya's ability wasn't super useful in actual sort of military engagements, because she's kind of a win more button. But now that she can affect religious units, she's like an ultra giga guru who is going to give you absurd amounts of health and shred enemy inquisitors and stuff like that on the offensive. They also fixed an issue causing hero antiquity shipwrecks to be placed in ocean tiles. I think it was if Sinbad or heroes died in ocean, they would drop like an antiquity site there, which is obviously not what you want. You want it to be on a coastal tile, because that's kind of like where the rest of the shipwrecks go. Passive ability icons added for heroes and on heroes and great people screen. Brilliant. Added new hero glow animation for hero unit flags. Cool, neat. There's also been some improvements for the AI. They've improved the logic for demands. The AI does not ask for them when they're at a disadvantage. And there's also, this is the thing we've been waiting for, the stop asking me button for AI friendship and peace requests, as well as the do not ask again option to deal items requested by the AI. This is basically, if they keep asking you for your great works of writing, you can click on them and say, hey, stop asking for this, and they will stop asking for it. And there's also a button where you could just say, hey, straight up, just stop trading with me. I am tired of getting pop-ups from you. They've also added some additional considerations for the cost of peace and improved the AI logic to raise cities. So especially they're going to be raising Mayan cities, which kind of sucks for the Mayans, but typically if you conquer the Mayans, their cities are not very good for you. They're typically settled off of fresh water and are just going to struggle. You very rarely can you find a place to actually place an aqueduct. And they've also prioritized the purchase of heroes and additional AI improvements. Very, very cool. Otherwise, it's mostly just bug fixes, but I think all in all, this is probably one of the biggest balance patches ever put out for Civ 6. It has huge, sweeping, mega implications for how the game is going to be played and the variety of strategies that are going to be viable. At least that's what my analysis is. I think some of these changes, I think particularly the policy card changes, this feels like the real focus of this patch, and this is massive, particularly things like free market rationalism and simultaneum, and then the cards that also give you extra great people points. I'm really excited to try out playing tall, because playing super wide all the time is a little bit stale. So I like now that there's going to be even more pushing, and it really feels like they have been essentially from launch trying to push players in a more tall direction and just haven't been able to really make that happen. So now they're taking drastic action, which I'm kind of a little bit like, ooh, this is we're in dangerous territory. We haven't seen changes like this sweeping in a long time. But I'm also kind of excited because, maybe the game is more fun now. And I hope you guys enjoyed my analysis of the patch notes. I love you all very much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.